X marks the spot, except for when it doesn't. Okay, I'm in the middle of a car park here in Winchester, and according to hundreds of British newspapers, King Alfred was buried here beneath this very car park, one of England's greatest kings, the man that took on the Vikings, the man that pretty much laid the foundation for the formation of England. Apparently he's here. Now, this wouldn't be the first king to be found beneath a car park. Richard III famously was. So when I saw all those headlines appear, I thought to myself, goodness me, we've done it again. Surely this is one of the biggest archaeological discoveries in decades. So who exactly found him? Which university excavated this? Where are the archaeologists? And have they found human remains, radiocarbon dated them and extracted the DNA? Because if someone had genuinely found some evidence that King Alfred was buried here in this car park, well, that changes history altogether. So I went looking for this evidence, and almost straight away it started not making sense. Okay, so this is the car park, and this is Graham Phillips. This is the man that has claimed that he's discovered this new burial place for King Alfred. Now, we'll get back to Graham very shortly, because before we try and understand this claim, well, we need to understand why it is so important. This would truly be one of the most groundbreaking archaeological discoveries of our generation. Alfred wasn't just another king. He defeated the Vikings, rebuilt a kingdom, reformed its laws, promoted learning, and laid the foundation for what would eventually become England. We have his coins, his laws, his writings, his biography written by a man who actually knew him. For a king who died more than 1,100 years ago, that's extraordinary. And yet, despite all of that, nobody knows exactly where he is. Or at least that's what I thought until I read all of these newspaper headlines. Okay, back to Graham Phillips. Graham is the man that has claimed to have found this final resting place of King Alfred here in this car park in Winchester. Now, Graham has described himself as a number of things in the past: an author, journalist, and a historical detective. Now, he spent decades trying to uncover some of history's greatest mysteries. Over the years, he's claimed to have identified the location of King Arthur's grave, the historical Camelot, the Holy Grail, the Staff of Moses, the Ark of the Covenant, the tomb of Virgin Mary, and even argued Merlin travelled to America. Okay, none of that means that he's wrong. People can have unconventional ideas and still be right, but what it does mean is these unconventional ideas aren't new here. So Graham's claims are perhaps the biggest yet. Now, Graham says he's identified the spot where King Alfred now lies, not because archaeologists have excavated a grave, not because anyone has ever found a skeleton, and not because we radiocarbon dated human remains. But as Graham puts it himself, I have found documents that suggest what happened to Alfred's remains. Well, that sounds really promising, so let's read them. Okay, first of all, very quick bit of historical context. I'll put a timer here so you don't get bored and fall asleep. Stay with it, this is good. Alfred dies 899 and is buried in Winchester's Old Minster. Now, just a few years later, his son Edward the Algar has his father's body removed into the newly built New Minster. Then in 1110, the monks abandoned New Minster altogether. They moved to a brand new monastery called Hyde Abbey, taking Alfred's remains with them. Kind of would have been about here. There they stay until the dissolution. Hyde Abbey is then demolished. Centuries pass, and we're done. Well done. I told you could do this. Right, here's where things get interesting. 1788, a prison is built right here on this site. Now, this here is where Graham says things get interesting, where the story begins. Now, this is an account published in 1800 by Henry Howard. Now, Henry Howard doesn't see the prison works, but he does interview Richard Page, who was the prison supervisor, the prison keeper at the time, and this is that document. Now, Page describes the workers uncovering 3 stone coffins near the east end of the church. One was lined with lead. Inside were bones and fragments of clothing. The lead was solid. The coffins were smashed. The bones literally thrown around. Okay, so this is where I get a bit confused, because don't forget, Graham has already said, I found documents that suggest what happened to Alfred's remains. Now, this is that document. Now, this hasn't been hidden secretly for hundreds of years, 226 in fact. In fact, people have been talking about this for a long time. This is the British Archaeological Magazine. This is 12 years ago, 2014, when Mike Pitts is talking about that very document. So it seems that we've got the central evidence behind Graham's claims actually being discussed in this at least over a decade ago, and probably beyond that. So if these documents were already known about, what exactly is it that Graham is claiming to have discovered? Okay, so as far as I can tell, he's taken this, Henry Howard's sketched map from 1800, along with that interview with Richard Page, the prison keeper. And again, as far as I can tell, this seems to be him working forward from this sketch. This forms the entire basis for this claim. Page pointed out where he remembered the Abbey Church, where the coffins had been uncovered, and Howard sketched it. But get this, he even warned the readers. Right here, look at this. But I must forewarn you not to expect great accuracy, as the plan and measurements are taken solely by stepping on the ground in different directions and without instruments or chain. And yet somehow more than 2 centuries later, this rough sketch has become, it's right here. And there's nothing wrong with doing this. This is exactly what archaeologists do before they put a shovel in the ground. I would love to do this. If I'd have seen this and known about this, I'd love to try and work out where it was, for fun if anything else. But for this to be true and the claim to be true, it relies on a remarkable amount of assumptions. Number 1, Howard's sketch has to be accurate. Number 2, Richard Page's memory has to be accurate. Number 3, Howard's pacing has to be accurate. Number 4, the position of the church has to be accurate. Number 5, the tiny point marked A has to represent the exact coffin. Number 6, the coffin has to belong to Alfred rather than any other royal or any other person. Number 7, the bones thrown around in 1788 have to be the same bones still lying there today. Number 8, and 2 centuries later, building work have somehow not have disturbed all of that again. Add to all of that, well, this map isn't even geo-referenced. Remember, it's a sketch. Now, the thing is, none of these assumptions are discoveries. They're interpretations, and this is really important because we weren't presented with, oh, here is a map and here is how I've interpreted it. We were very much presented with King Alfred's grave, burial place has been found. Okay, really important reality check. So where exactly does this story go to now? Well, Graham Phillips is now asking for ground penetrating radar, I think from Winchester University. So my question is, exactly what is that going to find? You still need to recover remains, you still need to date them, and somehow you still have to prove they belong to Alfred himself. So it's my understanding that the production company behind Graham's programme asked Winchester University to support them with this radar survey. Now, they didn't reply according to that production company. However, Winchester University then released their own statement. They pointed out that identifying Alfred's remains is complex, an archaeological problem. They highlighted the work they've already carried out with Hyde 900 and referred people back to the decades of research already undertaken on this site. Okay, so very briefly back to the map, because let's say this did go ahead. Let's say there was some funding and somebody came up with some ground penetrating radar. Well, it very much depends on that interpretation. If we move the interpretation just by a few meters one way or by another, we're going to completely miss that opportunity. It seems like a lot of money for what isn't an archaeological site. This is, to repeat, Graham's interpretation of a sketch from 225 years ago. Okay, I don't want to be cynical about all this, I really don't, but I guess with that, the thing that disappoints me the most isn't necessarily the claim itself. History does advance because people ask difficult questions and challenge old ideas. There's nothing wrong with that. What disappointed me the most from all of this is we seem to have gone from car park to there's a lot of noise on social media to newspapers going absolutely mad to all of a sudden TV programme, and now we're assuming this is gospel. One of the biggest archaeological mysteries has been solved when it really hasn't. All of this to me is hugely important. You see, pseudo-archaeology doesn't always arrive wearing a tin-foil hat. Sometimes it arrives in a documentary, repeated by newspapers until speculation starts sounding like fact. If we do eventually discover King Alfred's grave, and I really hope we do, that it's led by archaeology and then by the newspapers, not the other way around as per this case. Also, another quick side note for you, Jenna has also done a much deeper dive on this than I ever knew how to, really cover the in-depth history of how the bones got to where they were, from where they were and how they moved, all of that nuanced, wonderful stuff that you want to know. So go and click on Jenna's video, I'll put the link here and obviously just below. I've been Paul, I'll see you this time next week.